I was standing in my kitchen when my son told the pastor I didn't know what I was talking about. The same kitchen where I'd fed him every meal for 18 years. The same kitchen where red beans and rice had been simmering since dawn, filling the mobile home with the smell of comfort I'd been providing my whole life. But now my son was sitting in my living room with his wife beside him, her hand on his knee, both of them looking at Pastor Williams with expressions of deep concern, while I stood there in my cherry red housecoat trying to explain that money was missing from my account. Again. The morning light coming through the window caught the dust particles in the air, making them dance like tiny witnesses to my humiliation. I could see the reflection of my face in the microwave door, tired, older than my 75 years, with eyes that had cried too many nights. Pastor Williams sat in the armchair I'd bought at a yard sale 20 years ago, his Bible resting on his lap like a shield between us. He kept looking from me to my son, trying to understand which version of reality to believe. "Mama's been confused lately," my son said, his voice dripping with manufactured sadness. "We're worried about her memory." His wife nodded, her eyes glistening with fake tears. "She keeps forgetting things. Yesterday she couldn't remember if she'd taken her pills." I looked at my plastic pill organizer with the days of the week sitting on the counter. Tuesday's compartment was empty because I'd taken those pills 6 hours ago, same time I took them every single day of my life. But they were making me sound like I couldn't remember my own name. Pastor Williams shifted in his seat, the old springs creaking under his weight. "Mrs. Henderson, have you considered that maybe your son is right? Stress can do funny things to our memory." The betrayal of that moment, having my own pastor doubt me, felt like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles went white. "Pastor, I know what I know. My bank statements don't lie." "Sometimes we misread things," he said gently. Too gently, the way you talk to a child or someone whose mind is slipping away. "Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. How a woman who'd lived 75 years, raised 3 children, buried a husband, and survived more than most people could imagine ended up being called crazy in her own home by her own blood." It was autumn when this really started, though I didn't know it then. The kind of Alabama autumn where the light turns golden in the afternoon and makes everything look softer than it actually is. I was folding laundry at my kitchen table with the TV on low, the way I did every Tuesday morning. My mobile home sat in a quiet park with a wooden deck overlooking a small yard where I used to grow tomatoes before my knees got bad. Birmingham sprawled beyond the park, but my world had gotten smaller over the years, smaller and quieter. Just me and my routines and the neighborhood near the church where everyone knows everyone. The mobile home had been my sanctuary for 2 decades. Every corner held a memory. The slight water stain on the ceiling from when the roof leaked 5 years ago, the scuff marks on the hallway wall where my grandchildren used to run their toy cars, the loose floorboard near the bathroom that creaked in a way I'd grown to love because it meant home. The walls were covered with family photos, generations of faces smiling at futures they couldn't predict. If those photos could talk, they'd tell you about Sunday dinners and birthday parties and Christmas mornings when the space was too small for all the joy we crammed into it. I'd said my prayer that morning before my feet touched the floor. The same prayer I'd said for 50 years. "Lord, give me strength for what this day brings." I thought I was praying for the usual things: aching joints, loneliness, the empty rooms that used to be full of noise and life. I had no idea I was praying for the strength to survive my own child. The laundry was warm from the dryer. I was folding one of my son's old t-shirts that I still kept, even though he hadn't lived here in 30 years. Funny how we hold on to things. Funny how the objects we love can turn into weapons against us. That's when I noticed my checkbook sitting on the edge of the table. I'd been balancing it the night before, and something felt wrong. Numbers didn't match. I pulled out my bank statement and compared it line by line. 3 checks I didn't remember writing, one for $200, one for $350, one for $500. My hands started shaking, not because I was old and feeble like they'd later claim, because I knew, somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. I sat there for 20 minutes just staring at those numbers, hoping they'd rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The TV was playing some morning talk show, cheerful voices discussing recipes and home decorating, completely oblivious to the fact that my world was cracking open. I turned it off. The silence that followed was so thick I could barely breathe through it. I called my son. He answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful. "Hey, Mama, what's up? Did you write some checks from my account?" Pause, just long enough to make my stomach drop. "What checks, Mama?" "3 checks, nearly $1,000. "Mama." His voice shifted, became gentle, patronizing. "You probably wrote those yourself and forgot. You've been forgetting a lot lately." My chest tightened. This was the first time he'd said it so directly. The first time he'd accused me of memory loss to my face. "I have not been forgetting. It's okay. It happens. Lisa and I were just talking about how we need to help you keep track of things better." Lisa, his wife. The woman who smiled so sweetly every time she came over, who brought me flowers and called me Mom, who I'd welcomed into my family like my own daughter. "I didn't write these checks," I said, my voice hard. "Let me come over. We'll figure it out together." He showed up an hour later with Lisa. She was carrying a casserole dish covered in foil, wearing a concerned expression that looked so real it made me doubt myself. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you question everything you know to be true. They sat at my kitchen table while I showed them the checkbook. My son barely glanced at it. "Mama, you've been stressed. You probably paid some bills and forgot." "What bills?" "I pay everything online now. You set that up for me." "Exactly. So maybe you got confused between the online payments and the checks." Do you hear what he was doing? Do you hear how smoothly he turned my words against me? Every explanation I gave became proof that I was confused. Every certainty became doubt. Lisa put her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm and soft. "We love you so much. We just want to help." I pulled my hand away. "I don't need help. I need to know where my money went." My son sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "We'll look into it. But Mama, I think you should consider letting me have power of attorney, just to make things easier." "I don't want to make things easier. I want answers." Lisa leaned forward, her voice dropping to that intimate tone women use when they're sharing secrets. "Mom, we're not trying to control you. We just see how hard it is for you to keep track of everything. The bills, the medications, the appointments. We want to help lighten your load." "My load is fine." "Is it?" My son gestured around the kitchen. "When's the last time you cleaned out the refrigerator? When's the last time you organized your files? You're overwhelmed, and you won't admit it." I wanted to scream that my refrigerator was clean, that my files were organized, that I was managing just fine before they started stealing from me. But the words stuck in my throat because a small part of me wondered if he was right. Had I been forgetting things? Was I overwhelmed? Was I losing my grip on reality? That's how they do it. They plant the seed of doubt so deep you start watering it yourself. They left 30 minutes later after Lisa hugged me and whispered, "We're here for you, no matter what." I stood on my wooden deck and watched their brand new Cadillac Escalade in midnight black pull out of the park. That car cost more than I made in 2 years of pension checks. Where did they get the money for a car like that? But I pushed the thought away, because this was my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed everything for. He wouldn't steal from me, would he? That was 2 years ago, 2 years of slow, careful theft disguised as concern. 2 years of them positioning themselves as my caretakers while they emptied my accounts. 2 years of me making excuses for them because the alternative was too horrible to accept. I believed it was my fault. That's the worst part. When you love someone and they hurt you, your brain tries to make sense of it by blaming yourself. I must have forgotten. I must have gotten confused. I must be getting old and losing my mind like they said. Because if I wasn't losing my mind, that meant my son was stealing from me. And I couldn't live with that truth. Not yet. So I gave them everything they asked for. When my son said he needed help with his mortgage, I wrote a check for $3,000. When Lisa said their car needed repairs, I handed over $500 in cash. When they suggested I add my son's name to my checking account, just in case something happens, I signed the papers at the bank while the teller looked at me with pity I didn't understand. The sacrifices started small and grew bigger. I stopped playing dominoes with my friends from church on Thursday nights because I couldn't afford to lose even $5 anymore. I stopped buying the good coffee I liked and switched to the cheap store brand. I started eating 1 meal a day instead of 2 because my pension check barely lasted 2 weeks now, let alone a month. The Thursday night domino games had been my lifeline for 15 years. We'd meet at the church basement, 6 of us women who'd known each other since our children were in Sunday school together. We'd play for hours, talking and laughing and competing with the kind of friendly rivalry that comes from deep affection. Betty always brought her famous lemon bars. Dorothy would update us on her son in the military. Margaret told the dirtiest jokes you ever heard come out of a church lady's mouth. The last time I went, I only had $3 in my purse. When it was my turn to buy the coffee, we rotated $1 each week. I had to pretend I'd forgotten my wallet. Betty covered for me, waving off my apologies, but I saw the look she exchanged with Dorothy. That look that said, "Is she okay?" That look that said, "Something's not right." I never went back. Told them I had a doctor's appointment that conflicted with game night. Then another appointment. Then I said my arthritis was acting up, and it was hard to sit that long. Eventually, they stopped calling to remind me. Eventually, I became the friend who disappeared, and they moved on without me. My hobby used to bring me joy. Those domino games were more than just games. They were connection, laughter, competition, community. But I gave them up without my son or his wife ever asking me to. I gave them up because I didn't have gas money to drive to the church. I gave them up because I was ashamed of how poor I'd become. I gave them up because I was disappearing, and I didn't even know it. Food became functional instead of pleasurable. I used to cook meals that made the whole mobile home smell like home. Red beans and rice with ham hocks, fried chicken with collard greens, peach cobbler that made my grandchildren fight over seconds. But I stopped cooking like that, started buying the cheapest cuts of meat, started skipping meals entirely some days. My body got thinner. My friends at church noticed, but I made excuses, said I was trying to eat healthier, said my appetite wasn't what it used to be. Lies are easier than admitting your own child is bleeding you dry. I remember standing in the grocery store one afternoon, staring at a package of chicken thighs that cost $8. $8 that might as well have been $80. I put it back and bought a can of tuna instead. 69 cents. I could stretch that into 2 meals if I was careful. The woman behind me in line was buying steaks and fresh vegetables and a birthday cake for someone she loved. I wanted to cry right there in the checkout aisle. The thing about faith is, it can sustain you and blind you at the same time. I prayed every morning before my feet touched the floor, asking God to help me understand what was happening. But I also prayed for patience with myself, for forgiveness for my failing memory, for acceptance of my limitations. I was praying for God to help me survive, the very thing I should have been praying for Him to help me escape. Every Sunday I sat in the same pew I'd sat in for 40 years, in the neighborhood near the church where everyone knows everyone. I'd smile and shake hands and pretend everything was fine while my savings evaporated and my son's lies multiplied. The cognitive dissonance was destroying me. How could the boy I raised in that church, the boy who sang in the choir and served as an usher, be stealing from his own mother? It didn't make sense. So I decided I must be the problem. The money kept disappearing. My son had full access to my account now, and checks I didn't write kept clearing. When I asked about them, he'd show me the signature line. "That's your signature, Mama." And it was. My handwriting, my name, but I had no memory of writing them. "See?" he'd say gently. "You're forgetting more and more." Lisa started coming over every week with printed articles about dementia, about memory loss in elderly people, about the importance of family support during cognitive decline. She'd leave them on my kitchen counter next to my plastic pill organizer with the days of the week, a visual reminder of how supposedly confused I was. The articles were highlighted in yellow, certain passages marked with notes in her neat handwriting. This sounds like you, Mom. Have you experienced this? We should talk to your doctor about this. Each article was a brick in the wall they were building around me, sealing me into a narrative where I was incompetent and they were heroes. But I wasn't confused. Not about the things that mattered. I knew what day it was. I knew the prayer I said every morning. I knew my own mind. What I didn't know was that they were forging my signature, that my son was writing checks to himself and signing my name, that Lisa was coaching him on exactly what to say to make me doubt my sanity. I started keeping my own records, writing down every penny I spent in a notebook I hid in my bedroom, checking my account every single day online. The numbers still didn't match, but now I had proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that something was very wrong. But when I showed my son the notebook, he just smiled sadly. "Mama, you're obsessing. This isn't healthy. The account is $3,000 short this month. You're counting wrong. I counted 5 times. Then you made the same mistake 5 times." Round and round we went. Every conversation ended the same way, with me feeling smaller and more uncertain and more ashamed. They were so good at it, so practiced. They never raised their voices, never got angry, just kept speaking to me like I was a confused child who needed patient correction. You want to know the worst part? The community believed them. When I tried to talk to my pastor about the missing money, he suggested I was under stress. When I mentioned it to my domino friends, they nodded sympathetically and said aging was hard. When I finally worked up the courage to tell my daughter, who lived in Atlanta, she said, "Mama, maybe you should let someone help manage your finances." Everyone believed I was losing my mind because my son and his wife had spent 2 years building that narrative. They'd done it so carefully, so methodically, that by the time I was ready to fight back, the whole church thought I was senile. The discovery came on a Sunday. Not in my home where they'd been so careful, not in private where they could control the story. In public, at a church potluck after service where their mask finally slipped. I'd brought a dish of baked beans because that's all I could afford to make. My son and Lisa had brought a fancy catered tray that probably cost $100. We were standing in the fellowship hall, autumn light streaming through the windows, making everything look warm and peaceful. I was holding a paper plate with a sad little serving of potato salad when I heard Lisa's voice from the dessert table. She was talking to 3 women from the choir. I was standing maybe 10 feet away, partially hidden by a group of people. She didn't see me. She had no idea I could hear every word. "Honestly, it's gotten so bad," Lisa was saying, her voice full of false concern. "She doesn't even notice when we take the money anymore. We just tell her she already spent it, and she believes us." One of the women gasped, "That's awful." "I know, it's so sad. But what can we do? Someone has to manage her finances." Another woman looked uncomfortable. "Have you talked to her doctor?" "We're working on it. Getting her to accept help is the hard part. She's so stubborn." The third woman glanced around and her eyes landed on me. Our gazes met. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized I'd heard everything. The paper plate slipped from my hands. Baked beans splattered across the church linoleum. The sound made Lisa turn around. When she saw me standing there, her face went white, then red. Then she smiled, actually smiled. "Oh, Mom, I didn't see you there. We were just—" I didn't let her finish. I walked out of that fellowship hall, out of that church, into the parking lot where the autumn sun was too bright and my hands were shaking so hard I could barely get my keys out of my purse. My legs felt like they might give out. I leaned against my car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with rust spots on the doors and a crack in the windshield I couldn't afford to fix. The parking lot was full of nice cars, newer models that reflected the autumn sunlight like they were showing off. Lisa's voice kept echoing in my head. "She doesn't even notice when we take the money anymore." The casual cruelty of it, the bragging, the complete lack of shame. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember parking or walking up the wooden deck steps or unlocking my door. What I remember is standing in my kitchen, the smell of old coffee and desperation, seeing that plastic pill organizer with the days of the week sitting on the counter like a monument to their lies. You're forgetting to take your pills, Mama. You're getting confused, Mama. You're not yourself anymore, Mama. I picked up that pill organizer and threw it against the wall as hard as my 75-year-old arm could manage. It exploded. Pills scattered across the kitchen floor like tiny white accusations. Sunday's pills and Monday's pills and Tuesday's pills that I'd taken exactly on schedule every single day of my life because I wasn't confused, and I wasn't forgetting, and I wasn't losing my goddamn mind. I sank to the floor. Pills pressed into my knees. I sobbed so hard I thought my chest would crack open. Everything I'd believed about my son shattered in that moment. He wasn't helping me. He was robbing me. He wasn't concerned about my health. He was destroying my credibility so no one would believe me when I finally figured out what he was doing. And his wife. Sweet Lisa with her casseroles and her flowers and her articles about dementia. She'd been in on it the whole time, laughing about it, bragging about how easy it was to steal from me. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and the sun had set outside my window. I cried for the mother I'd been and the son I'd thought I had. I cried for the money and the dignity and the 2 years of my life they'd stolen while making me think I was crazy. And then I stopped crying, because somewhere in that grief, a different feeling emerged. Cold, hard, focused, rage. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was stupid. They thought they could take everything from me. And I'd just accept it because I was old and alone, and who would believe me anyway? They were about to find out exactly how wrong they were. I got up from the floor, my knees aching from the pills pressed into them, and went to wash my face. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with red eyes and tear-stained cheeks. But there was something else there too. Something fierce. Something that had been sleeping and was now wide awake. 2 days later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer because I was still raw, still trying to figure out what to do next, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Henderson?" A woman's voice. Familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Yes, this is Rachel, Lisa's sister." My whole body went cold. Lisa's sister, another enemy, another person who thought I was a senile old woman they could. "I heard what happened at the church," Rachel said. "I need to talk to you." We met at a coffee shop downtown. Rachel was younger than Lisa, maybe 40, with tired eyes and hands that shook when she wrapped them around her mug. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I've been watching my sister for months," she said, "watching what she's doing to you. I couldn't say anything because she's family, but after Sunday." She looked down at her coffee. "I can't stay quiet anymore." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're right, about all of it. My sister has been stealing from you, so has your son. I've heard them talk about it, brag about it. They think it's funny how easy you are to manipulate." The words should have hurt, but I was past hurt. I was in the place beyond pain, where everything becomes crystalline and clear. "What exactly have you heard?" Rachel told me everything. How my son had started planning this 3 years ago when he got in debt from gambling. How he'd brought Lisa in on the scheme. How they'd studied techniques for financial elder abuse and gaslighting. How they'd practiced their concerned expressions in the mirror. How they'd deliberately isolated me from my friends and community so no one would believe me when I finally caught on. "They have a folder on their computer," Rachel said. "Bank statements, forged checks, a spreadsheet tracking how much they've taken. They're planning to get full power of attorney and move you into a nursing home so they can sell your mobile home." My mobile home, the place I'd lived for 20 years, the home I'd bought with my late husband's insurance money. They wanted to take that too. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Because my sister did this to our mother 5 years ago, drained her accounts, and put her in a state facility where she died alone. I didn't stop it then because I didn't understand what was happening. I won't make that mistake again." She slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything's on here. Bank records I copied from their computer. Text messages between them. Photos of the spreadsheet. Enough to prove what they've been doing." I looked at that small piece of plastic and metal. Such a tiny thing to hold so much power. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing. Just promise me you'll fight back. Promise me you won't let them win. I closed my fingers around the USB drive. I promise. Rachel told me more as we sat in that coffee shop, the sounds of espresso machines and casual conversations creating a strange soundtrack to the systematic destruction of my son's lies. She told me about the text messages where Lisa complained about having to visit me, calling it managing the asset. She told me about the night they celebrated hitting $25,000 in theft, toasting with champagne and laughing about how convincing they were. She told me about their plans to get me diagnosed with dementia, how they'd researched doctors who would be sympathetic to concerned family members and quick to issue diagnoses based on limited observation. "They've got it all planned out," Rachel said, her voice breaking. 6 more months of this, then they push for conservatorship. Once they have that, you'll have no rights. They'll control everything: your money, your home, where you live, what medical care you receive. You'll be legally incompetent, and there won't be anything you can do about it. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I kept holding it because I needed something to anchor me to reality. Why now? Why tell me now? Because Sunday was the first time I saw Lisa get careless. She's always been so careful about maintaining the act, especially in public. But she's getting cocky, confident. She thinks you're so beaten down that it doesn't matter anymore, and that's when people make mistakes. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at every file Rachel had given me. Bank statements showing systematic withdrawals. Text messages where my son and Lisa joked about my senior moments. The spreadsheet that listed every theft down to the penny. $27,000 over 2 years. $27,000. My pension was $1,200 a month. They'd stolen nearly 2 years of my income. No wonder I'd been eating 1 meal a day. No wonder I couldn't afford gas to see my friends. They'd taken everything and made me think it was my fault. But I had proof now. I had evidence. I had the truth documented in ways they couldn't deny. The question was what to do with it. I could go to the police, could press charges, could watch my son get arrested and his wife charged as an accomplice. Part of me wanted that. Wanted to see them in handcuffs. Wanted justice served cold and public and devastating. But there was another way. A way that would hurt them more than any courtroom ever could. I spent the next week planning. First, I went to the bank and removed my son's name from my account. The banker tried to talk me out of it. "Are you sure, Mrs. Henderson? Your son has been so helpful managing your finances." "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady, "and I'd like copies of every transaction on this account for the past 3 years." "That's a lot of paperwork." "I have time." The banker, a young man with slicked back hair and a tie that was too wide, looked uncomfortable. He kept glancing at his computer screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Mrs. Henderson, I should tell you that removing an authorized user requires both signatures. That's not what your policy says. I'm the primary account holder. I have the right to remove anyone I want." "Well, yes, technically, but..." "No buts. Remove him. Now." Something in my voice must have convinced him I wasn't the confused old lady my son had probably described. He processed the paperwork with shaking hands, printed out the 3 years of statements I requested, and handed me a new debit card. "This will deactivate his card immediately." "Good." Next, I visited a lawyer, showed him the USB drive, showed him the bank statements, watched his face go from polite interest to genuine shock. "Mrs. Henderson, this is elder financial abuse. It's a felony." "I know." "We should contact the police immediately." "Not yet. First, I need you to help me set up something." I told him my plan. He tried to talk me out of it, said it was risky, said it might not work, said I should just let the legal system handle it. But eventually, he agreed, because he understood what I understood. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's about power. The lawyer's name was Marcus, a man in his 50s who told me he'd handled 3 similar cases in the past year alone. "It's an epidemic," he said, "adult children stealing from their parents. And the worst part is how often it goes unreported because the victims are too ashamed or too scared or too broken down to fight back. "I'm not broken," I told him. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "No, ma'am. I can see that you're not." The trap was simple. I put $500 cash in an envelope in my kitchen drawer, just like I used to do when I was saving for Christmas gifts, back before they stole that ability from me. I called my son and mentioned it casually. "I got my pension check early this month," I said, "saving some cash for Christmas, going to buy the grandkids something nice." "That's sweet, Mama." I could hear the greed in his voice even through the phone. "Where are you keeping it?" "In the drawer by the sink, same place I always keep my cash." 3 days later, I checked the drawer. The money was gone. But that was fine, because the camera I'd installed in the corner of my kitchen, hidden behind a picture frame, had recorded everything. My son's hand reaching into the drawer, his wife standing by the window keeping watch, both of them counting my money in my own kitchen, in my own home, the place where I'd raised him and loved him and believed in him. I watched that video 5 times. Watched my son steal from me with the same hands I'd held when he was learning to walk. Watched his wife, who called me Mom, rifle through my belongings like a common thief. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, you know this feeling. This moment when the person you thought you knew becomes a stranger. When the past rewrites itself and you realize all those sweet moments were lies. All those I love yous were manipulation. All those hugs were just opportunities to get closer to your wallet. It destroys something in you, but it also builds something new, something harder, something that knows how to survive. The confrontation wasn't private. I didn't invite them over for a quiet conversation. I didn't give them a chance to spin this into another story about my failing memory. I chose community, the neighborhood near the church where everyone knows everyone. The place where they'd built their reputation on my destruction. Sunday morning. Same fellowship hall where I'd heard Lisa brag about stealing from me. Same autumn light through the windows. But this time I was ready. I stood up during announcement time. Pastor Williams looked surprised because I'd never asked to speak before, but he nodded and handed me the microphone. "I have something to say," I began. My voice was shaking but clear. "For 2 years, my son and daughter-in-law have been stealing from me." The room went silent. I could see my son in the 3rd row, his face going pale. Lisa beside him, her mouth opening in shock. "They took $27,000 from my account. They forged my signature on checks. They told everyone I was losing my mind so no one would believe me when I figured it out. They called me confused and forgetful and senile while they robbed me blind. Mama," my son started to stand. "Sit down." My voice cracked like a whip. He sat. I told them everything, about the missing money and the gaslighting and the isolation, about how they'd planned to take my home and put me in a nursing home, about the spreadsheet and the text messages and the camera footage of them stealing from my kitchen. I told them about the domino nights I'd given up because I couldn't afford the gas money, about the meals I'd skipped because my pension check ran out halfway through the month, about the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was really losing my mind, if I was really as confused and incompetent as they said I was. "They made me believe I was crazy," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "They made me doubt my own mind. They took my money, but worse than that, they tried to take my sanity. They tried to take my dignity." I could see people in the congregation crying now. Not Lisa's fake tears, but real ones. Tears of recognition and shame and anger. The congregation was absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the worn carpet. I saw faces I'd known for decades. Betty from Domino Night, Dorothy with her military son, Margaret who told the dirty jokes. They were all staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to horror to shame. These were the people who'd believed my son's lies. These were the people who'd dismissed my concerns as confusion. "I have proof," I said, "bank statements, videos, text messages where they joke about how easy it is to manipulate me. I have everything." The congregation was dead silent. Some people looked shocked, some looked angry, some looked ashamed that they'd believed my son's lies about my mental state. Pastor Williams asked to see me after the service. I showed him the USB drive, showed him the video of my son stealing cash from my drawer, showed him the spreadsheet tracking their thefts. He called the church board together right there in his office. They watched everything. Then they asked my son and Lisa to join us. My son tried to deny it, tried to say the video was fake, tried to claim I was confused and vengeful and making things up. But the evidence didn't lie. Numbers don't gaslight. Video doesn't forget. Lisa cried. Actual tears this time, not the fake ones she'd used to manipulate me. "We were just trying to help," she sobbed. "We thought we were protecting her assets." "By stealing them?" Pastor Williams asked. His voice was cold. I'd never heard him sound like that. "We were going to pay it back." "With what money? The money you stole?" The church board made a decision right there. My son was removed from his position as deacon. Both he and Lisa were asked to leave the congregation. Not excommunicated exactly, but made unwelcome. In a neighborhood near the church where everyone knows everyone, that was a death sentence to their reputation. But the real justice came 2 weeks later. My son worked at a bank, had worked there for 15 years. It was a good job, respectable, well paid, the kind of job that requires trust and integrity, and a clean record. When the police investigation started, his employer found out. They put him on administrative leave while they reviewed whether someone who stole from his own mother could be trusted with other people's money. The review didn't take long. He was fired within a month. Lisa lost her job too. She worked in healthcare, and financial elder abuse is exactly the kind of thing that raises red flags in background checks. No hospital wants to employ someone who steals from vulnerable people. They lost their income, their reputation, their place in the community. Their friends who'd believed their lies started asking questions. People who'd felt sorry for them, who'd thought they were such good children taking care of their aging mother, realized they'd been duped. And that Cadillac Escalade, in midnight black, the one they'd bought with my money, they had to sell it to pay their legal fees. Last I heard, they were driving a 15-year-old sedan and living in an apartment half the size of their old house. I didn't press criminal charges in the end. My lawyer advised me to, but I decided against it. Not because I forgave them. I will never forgive them. But because I didn't need the legal system to destroy them. They'd destroyed themselves, and watching them lose everything they'd built on my suffering was more satisfying than any prison sentence could have been. The rebirth started small. I closed the joint account and opened a new one in just my name. Changed my locks so they couldn't let themselves into my home anymore. Started keeping my own records without someone telling me I was counting wrong. Then I started cooking again. Red beans and rice when I wanted them. Fried chicken when I had a craving. Food became my liberation symbol. Every meal I cooked exactly the way I liked it, with no one else's preferences to consider, was a small declaration of independence. The first time I made a full Sunday dinner after everything happened, I stood in my kitchen and cried. But they were different tears. Not tears of despair or confusion or shame, tears of reclamation. I made fried chicken with my grandmother's recipe, the one that calls for buttermilk and cayenne pepper. I made collard greens with ham hocks, simmering them for hours until the whole mobile home smelled like home again. I made cornbread in the cast-iron skillet my late husband gave me on our 10th anniversary. As I cooked, memories flooded back. Not the painful ones from the past 2 years, but older memories, better ones. My grandmother teaching me how to season the chicken just right, how to know when the oil was hot enough, how to turn it at exactly the right moment so the crust stayed crispy. My late husband coming up behind me while I cooked, wrapping his arms around my waist and telling me I was the best cook in Alabama. My children as babies, sitting in high chairs, reaching for cornbread with sticky fingers. Those memories belong to me. My son and his wife had tried to steal my present and my future, but they couldn't take my past. They couldn't erase the woman I'd been before they started their campaign of destruction. That woman was still here. She'd been buried under layers of doubt and fear and shame, but she'd survived. And I ate it all by myself, at my kitchen table, with the TV on low and the afternoon light coming through the windows. It was the best meal I'd had in 2 years. I started going back to Domino's on Thursday nights. My friends welcomed me back with hugs and questions I mostly deflected. Word had spread through the church about what my son had done, so they understood why I'd disappeared. They understood I hadn't been sick or confused. I'd been fighting for my life. The mobile home in the quiet park became mine again, really mine. I painted the deck cherry red to match my favorite house coat, put up new curtains, bought a comfortable chair for the living room, and sat in it reading books I'd been too stressed to concentrate on before. Small pleasures became revolutionary acts. My plastic pill organizer with the days of the week was replaced with a new one. This one is yellow instead of blue, because I wanted something different, something that wasn't tainted by their manipulation. I take my pills every morning at the same time I always have. I haven't forgotten once. Funny how my memory improved the moment they stopped telling me it was failing. But the biggest change was internal. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped second-guessing my own perceptions, stopped making myself smaller to make other people comfortable. For 75 years, I'd been taught that good women sacrifice, good mothers give, good Christians forgive and forget, and turn the other cheek. I learned that goodness doesn't require self-destruction. That love without boundaries is just exploitation with better marketing. That forgiveness isn't mandatory, and some betrayals don't deserve redemption. I'm planning to move soon, somewhere with a warm climate where my bones don't ache in winter. Maybe Florida, maybe Arizona, somewhere new where no one knows my story unless I choose to tell it, where I can start fresh without the weight of family obligation crushing me. Sometimes I imagine myself in that new place, driving a brand new Cadillac Escalade in midnight black, just like the one they had to sell. Not because I need a fancy car, because the image makes me smile, because reclaiming the symbol of their theft and making it mine feels like poetry. My daughter from Atlanta came to visit last month. We hadn't talked much during the worst of it because she'd sided with my son, believed his lies about my mental state. She apologized, said she should have listened to me, should have questioned his story instead of accepting it. I accepted her apology, but I didn't forgive easily. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal just because someone says sorry. She'll have to earn her way back into my life, same as anyone else. I don't owe her access to me just because we share DNA. The grandchildren don't understand why they can't see me anymore. They're young, caught in the middle of adult dysfunction they didn't create. I feel bad about that, but not bad enough to let their parents back into my life. My son made his choice. He chose money over his mother. He chose cruelty over compassion. Those choices have consequences. Time has passed. The leaves have fallen and grown back and fallen again. The light that turns golden in Alabama autumn has cycled through another year. My faith, the prayer I say every morning before my feet touch the floor, has changed. I don't ask for strength to endure anymore. I ask for wisdom to recognize manipulation, for courage to defend myself, for peace in the life I'm building on my own terms. The neighborhood near the church where everyone knows everyone has mostly moved on. There's new gossip, new drama, new stories that don't involve me. Some people still whisper when I walk by. Some still wonder if maybe I exaggerated, if maybe my son wasn't really that bad, if maybe I was a little bit at fault. Let them wonder. I know the truth. I have the proof. And I don't need their validation to know I was right to fight back. So what do I want you to know if you're listening to this? What wisdom can I share from the wreckage of betrayal and the slow climb back to wholeness? First, trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that your perception is faulty just because it's inconvenient for them. Your mind knows the difference between forgetting and being lied to. Your gut knows the difference between love and manipulation. Second, protect your assets. Never give anyone complete access to your accounts. Not your children, not your spouse, not anyone. Keep your own records. Check your statements. Guard your financial independence like your life depends on it, because it does. The average age of abuse victims is 84 years old, according to research, but it starts long before that. It starts with small requests and reasonable explanations and helping hands that slowly tighten into chains. American research indicates that over 5 million seniors are abused every year. Financial abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect. Most of it happens in families. Most of it goes unreported because victims are ashamed or scared or convinced they somehow deserve it. Most of it continues because abusers are skilled at making their victims look unstable or confused when they try to get help. You are not confused. You are not imagining things. You are not too sensitive or too paranoid or too difficult. If someone is telling you that your memory is failing while their bank account is growing, believe your bank statement, not their gaslighting. Third, document everything. Keep records. Take photos. Save messages. Create a paper trail that can't be denied or rewritten. When someone is systematically destroying your credibility, evidence is your lifeline. It's the difference between being dismissed as a senile old woman and being recognized as a victim of financial crime. Fourth, find allies. Not everyone will believe you, especially if your abuser has spent years building a narrative about your incompetence. But somewhere, there's someone who will listen, someone who will see the truth, someone who will help you fight back. For me, it was Rachel, my daughter-in-law's sister. For you, it might be a friend, a neighbor, a social worker, a lawyer. Keep looking until you find them. Fifth, and this is the hardest one, accept that some relationships can't be saved. Some betrayals are too deep. Some people won't change no matter how much you want them to. Letting go of the family you wanted in order to protect yourself from the family you have is not failure. It's survival. The simplicity I've embraced isn't poverty. It's freedom. I don't need much, don't want much. Just peace and safety and the ability to make my own choices without someone undermining me. Just a warm place to live where I can cook what I want and see who I want and spend my money how I choose. That's not too much to ask. That's the bare minimum of human dignity. If you're in a situation like mine, if someone is stealing from you or gaslighting you or making you doubt your own mind, please hear this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You deserve better. And you have more power than you think. Fight back. Document. Report. Protect yourself. Cut off access to your accounts. Change your locks. Tell someone what's happening. Call Adult Protective Services. Call the police. Call a lawyer. Do whatever you need to do to stop the abuse and reclaim your life. Will it be easy? No. Will some people not believe you? Yes. Will you lose relationships that mattered to you? Probably. But you'll also gain something more valuable. Yourself, your dignity, your peace, your future. I'm 75 years old. I spent 2 years being stolen from and lied to by the person I loved most in the world. I lost money I'll never get back. I lost time with friends I can't recover. I lost the relationship with my son that I thought I had, but I gained myself. And that was worth everything. So where are you listening from? Are you in your kitchen, folding laundry like I was? Are you lying awake at night trying to figure out why the numbers don't match? Are you being told you're confused while someone's hand is in your pocket? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back sooner? Would you have pressed charges? Would you have forgiven? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your stories. I want to know I'm not the only one who survived this. I want to build a community of people who refused to be victims. And if this story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in my words or recognized someone you know, please like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's make sure that the 5 million seniors being abused every year know they have options, know they have power, know they're not alone. Because that's what I've learned through all of this. I'm not alone. You're not alone. We're survivors, and we're stronger than anyone who tried to break us ever imagined we could be. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for being here. Now go protect yourself. Go reclaim your life. Go be free. You deserve it.